Here at this site, we have the tomb of Moses.
There's a tomb here
Yeah,
of Moses.
yes.
Can we see it?
Yeah?
What if a single discovery could shake the very foundation of faith? Imagine archaeologists unsealing a tomb hidden for millennia marked with symbols no one expected, and inside something so startling it's sending shockwaves across religious communities. Could this be the final resting place of Moses, the man who parted seas, delivered divine law, and stood at the center of the world's three major monotheistic faiths? What if we've been wrong about where he lies? Or worse, what lies with him? This isn't about a dusty artifact or forgotten relic buried in sand. No, the whispers from the excavation site describe ancient writings on stone tablets, unfamiliar cultural symbols, and a depiction of a figure possibly disengaged in rituals that don't align with the faiths that revere him. These early findings raise uncomfortable questions. Was Moses influenced by known Abrahamic traditions? Could the roots of his story be more complex and more human than we've ever dared to believe? And here's the most unsettling part. If this tomb is authentic, it doesn't validate the sacred, it challenges it. The details uncovered so far don't just enrich our understanding of the past, they threaten to rewrite it. For centuries, Moses has been held as a beacon of divine law and spiritual purpose. But this discovery pulls back the curtain on a narrative that might not be as divinely dictated as we thought. What exactly did they find? Why are religious leaders worldwide scrambling to make sense of it? And what does it mean if Moses wasn't the flawless prophet we imagined, but a man navigating ancient complexities? Stay with us, because what's buried in this tomb could change everything we know about one of history's most sacred figures, the mystery of Moses. Final resting place has puzzled scholars, theologians, and believers for millennia. Despite being one of the most prominent figures in religious history, his burial location remains unknown. The Hebrew Bible states it plainly, but to this day no one knows where his grave is. Deuteronomy 34:6. Moses died in the land of Moab, and according to scripture, God himself buried him in a hidden place. But why? This deliberate secrecy has invited endless speculation. Some see it as a divine choice to prevent his grave from becoming an object of worship or idolatry. Others believe it was to ensure Moses remained a servant of the divine, not a relic of devotion. For centuries, pilgrims, mystics, and treasure hunters have searched for clues, hoping to uncover the final piece of his story. And yet, there's something poetic about that mystery. Moses, who led an entire people through the wilderness, never entered the promised land himself. His death wasn't public. No grand funeral, no mausoleum. Just silence and disappearance. It fits the story of a prophet who was more concerned with purpose than legacy. But what if someone did find something? What if that age-old mystery was finally solved and, instead of bringing comfort, it brought confusion? The recent rumors swirling around a remote site near Mount Nebo, long associated with Moses' final days, are reigniting these ancient questions. Could the most elusive tomb in history finally have been discovered? And if the answer is yes, what secrets might it hold? Does the truth lie buried beneath centuries of dust? Or are we about to uncover a chapter of human history that was never meant to be found? Rumors have begun to spread quiet at first, but now gaining traction among academic circles and religious communities alike. In a remote, arid region near Mount Nebo, believed to be the area where Moses spent his final days, a team of archaeologists has reportedly uncovered an ancient tomb sealed in an unusually sophisticated manner. Using ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging, the team detected a burial chamber buried beneath centuries of sediment and stone, untouched by looters or time. When they finally broke through, what they discovered was not just another tomb, but a chamber filled with relics that didn't match expectations. Stone tablets were found, but not the kind described in the Bible. These bore inscriptions in a hybrid of Semitic and Mesopotamian symbols, languages that shouldn't have shared the same canvas. Some of the carvings depicted rituals performed by a bearded figure, seemingly invoking forces outside the traditional Abrahamic narrative. What shocked researchers most wasn't just the presence of these foreign elements, it was their careful preservation. The chambers seemed to have been intentionally sealed to protect its contents, as if someone, long ago, understood the gravity of what was buried inside. Among the artifacts were ceremonial objects with iconography suggesting a blend of spiritual systems, symbols resembling early pagan traditions fused with Hebrew motifs. Initial carbon dating of the materials placed them around the time Moses would have lived. This alignment with biblical timelines is either an incredible coincidence or a profound revelation. Could it be that Moses, or someone from his inner circle, incorporated spiritual practices from neighboring civilizations? And if so, what does that mean for the religious traditions built around his legacy? This discovery doesn't just raise historical questions, it cracks open a vault of theological uncertainty. If authentic, it could force faith leaders, historians, and millions of believers to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about Moses. For millions around the world, Moses isn't just a historical figure, he's a symbol of divine authority, purity, and unwavering faith. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all regard him as a prophet handpicked by God to deliver law, lead people, and shape the moral compass of civilizations. To question his story is to question the foundation of these religions. So when a discovery hints at an alternate version of Moses, one intertwined with foreign symbols and unfamiliar rituals, it doesn't just cause curiosity, it causes fear. This fear is not irrational, it's deeply tied to identity. For many, their understanding of right and wrong, of salvation, and of spiritual truth begins with the belief that Moses was a direct channel for divine instruction. The suggestion that he may have practiced or been influenced by pagan rituals feels like a threat to the very framework of their faith. Religious leaders are especially uneasy. If the tomb's contents contradict established doctrine, how should they respond? Do they deny the evidence outright? Do they reinterpret centuries of teachings? Or do they ignore it and hope it fades away? These questions aren't just theological, they're existential. And let's be clear, this isn't about proving Moses wrong. What terrifies people is the idea that the divine might be more complex, less absolute, and far more entangled with human culture than they ever imagined. That instead of receiving truth from on high, perhaps ancient prophets navigated spiritual landscapes shaped by neighboring beliefs, adapting as they led. The idea that Moses was more human than holy doesn't erase faith, but it forces believers to wrestle with a truth that's harder, messier, and far more real. Faith thrives on clarity, on sacred stories that guide, instruct, and reassure. But history is messy. It's layered with context, culture, and contradiction. When the two collide, as they have in the case of this potential Moses tomb, what that happens. For many believers, faith is rooted in the idea of divine simplicity. God speaks, prophets obey, people follow. But the more archaeologists uncover, the more apparent it becomes that the ancient world wasn't so straightforward. It was a melting pot of beliefs, languages, and traditions. Prophets didn't live in isolation, they lived in cities, among merchants, soldiers, mystics, and rulers. They interacted with surrounding cultures, sometimes adopting ideas or reinterpreting them for their own people. If Moses was part of this cultural complexity, if his teachings were influenced by traditions outside of the Hebrew worldview that undermine his divine authority, or does it highlight something deeper? That faith itself is a living dialogue between the human and the divine. Some scholars argue that understanding the historical context of religious figures doesn't weaken faith, it enriches it. Knowing that Moses may have drawn from multiple traditions doesn't make his message any less powerful. In fact, it can make it more relatable. It shows that spiritual leaders worked within real human frameworks, wrestling with doubts, making choices, and adapting as they sought truth. But for others, this complexity is threatening. It challenges the image of a perfect prophet and introduces the possibility that scripture was shaped not just by divine inspiration, but by human hands. That revelation can feel like a betrayal. Still, perhaps faith was never meant to avoid questions. Perhaps its strength lies in being able to hold mystery and complexity together, accepting that what is sacred may also be surprisingly human. There's a reason. Moses' burial site has eluded discovery for thousands of years. According to the Bible, it was meant to be that way. Deuteronomy 34:6 states, "No one knows his burial place to this day, whether taken literally or symbolically." The message is clear. Moses was not meant to become a shrine. In the ancient world, the graves of prophets and kings often became holy sites, places of pilgrimage, ritual, and even worship. But Moses was different. His entire life pointed people toward God, not himself. If his grave had been marked, it might have become a monument not to faith, but to idolatry. Some believe God hid his tomb to protect the people from turning a man into a deity. Beyond the theological reasons, there are also practical ones. We're talking about an event that happened over 3,000 years ago. Geography shifts, earthquakes, erosion, and centuries of development have changed the landscape. Any markers that once existed could have been lost to time, even if someone had known the exact location back then. Oral tradition alone wouldn't have preserved it with accuracy over generations. Historical memory fades, especially when secrecy is intentional. There are even mystical traditions that claim Moses never died in the traditional sense, that he was taken up, like Elijah. Other apocryphal stories speak of angels hiding his body or protecting it until a future moment in history. These narratives, though speculative, reflect a deep-seated idea that Moses' final chapter was never meant to be fully known. Maybe the mystery is part of the message, that the legacy of Moses isn't tied to a grave, but to the journey, the law, and the people he inspired. While archaeology searches for physical proof, religious traditions and legends have long offered alternative explanations for Moses. Fates are mystical, others speculative, and a few outright fantastical. These stories don't exist in the official canon, but they've shaped the imagination of countless believers and seekers for generations. Some Jewish traditions suggest that Moses didn't die at all, at least not in the usual sense. Like the prophet Elijah, he was said to have been taken up by God, escaping mortal death entirely. This belief appears in various ancient writings outside the Torah and hints at Moses occupying a space between man and myth. In Christian texts, particularly the New Testament's Book of Jude, there's a strange reference to a dispute between the archangel Michael and the devil over Moses' body. No other biblical book elaborates on it, but it's given just enough space to suggest that something unusual happened, something spiritual and secretive that's never been fully explained. Other apocryphal texts and rabbinic legends describe angels hiding his body to protect it from corruption or misuse. Some even suggest that the tomb will only be revealed when humanity is ready, tying it to future messianic events or spiritual awakenings. And then there are the fringe theories that place Moses' tomb in unlikely locations or link his death to lost civilizations. These claims often lack evidence but thrive because of the vacuum left by the official silence together. These legends reveal one thing clearly: the mystery of Moses isn't just historical, it's deeply spiritual. His unknown grave has become a canvas for humanity's longing, fear, and faith. And maybe that's why it has never been and may never be fully found. Moses is one of those rare figures who transcends religion, geography, and time. He's revered not just as a prophet or leader, but as a symbol of liberation, justice, and divine calling. Across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, he holds a central role not merely for what he did, but for who he was. Born in a time of oppression, Moses' story begins with survival. As a baby, he was hidden in a basket and set afloat to escape death. Raised in the palace of Pharaoh, he lived between two worlds: royalty and slavery, privilege and pain. This internal tension defined his life. He could have stayed in comfort, but instead, he chose to confront injustice. What followed was a life of remarkable courage. He challenged Pharaoh, led his people through the Red Sea, and guided them through decades in the wilderness. These aren't just tales of miracles. They're examples of resilience and moral conviction. Moses became the voice of law and conscience, delivering the 10 Commandments, an ethical code that still influences legal systems and cultures worldwide. But Moses wasn't flawless. He doubted himself, he lost his temper, he disobeyed God, and still, he led. His greatness lies not in perfection, but in perseverance. He was a man who questioned, who wrestled with purpose, and who kept moving forward even when the path was unclear. That's why his legacy endures, because he wasn't just the man who parted the sea, he was the man who stood in the middle of impossible choices and kept going. Moses is remembered not because he never failed, but because he never gave up. And in that perhaps lies his most lasting lesson, that true greatness is found not in power, but in purpose. We often remember Moses for the miracles: the burning bush, the parted sea, the thunder on Mount Sinai. But beneath those legendary moments was a man riddled with doubt, fear, and frustration. And it's in those very human traits that Moses becomes most relatable. When God first called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses resisted. "I'm not a good speaker," he argued. "Send someone else." He wasn't eager to be a prophet. He was insecure, hesitant, and full of self-doubt. That alone challenges the idea of a flawless, divinely anointed leader. Why would a chosen prophet push back against his mission? Why would he question his own worth? Throughout his leadership, Moses struggled not just with the burden of responsibility, but with his own people. They doubted him, they rebelled, they complained. And Moses often reacted with frustration. He broke the tablets of the 10 Commandments. In anger, he pleaded with God to ease his burden, even asking to be taken from the world. In one of the most pivotal moments, Moses disobeyed a direct command from God. Instead of speaking to a rock to bring forth water, he struck it twice. Because of that act, he was denied entry into the Promised Land for all his faith and effort. Moses' journey ended just short of the goal. These aren't the actions of a perfect man. They're the struggles of someone navigating immense pressure, spiritual tension, and personal limits. And yet, these flaws don't diminish his greatness. They deepen it. They show that being chosen doesn't mean being flawless. It means being faithful even when flawed. Moses' humanity is not a weakness. In his story, it's the reason his story endures. Because in his doubts, tempers, and missteps, we see ourselves, and we're reminded that greatness often begins with honest struggle. Moses wasn't just a spiritual guide, he was also a lawgiver, administrator, and sometimes even a military commander. His leadership wasn't always gentle, and the Mosaic law he delivered wasn't always merciful by today's standards. But understanding his leadership requires understanding the context in which he operated. A nomadic people in the wilderness, under constant threat, struggling to form a new identity and survive. The laws attributed to Moses, the 10 Commandments, and the hundreds of additional statutes recorded in the Torah were revolutionary for their time. They provided a framework for justice, morality, and communal living. But they were also strict, emphasizing obedience, order, and purity. Some laws demanded harsh punishments, including exile or death, for offenses that might seem minor today. This rigidity wasn't just spiritual, it was strategic. Moses was shaping a nation out of chaos. The Israelites had been enslaved for generations and were now tasked with becoming a people united by covenant. In such fragile beginnings, strict rules helped establish cohesion and identity. But Moses' leadership style also revealed deep struggles. He was quick to anger. He issued commands in God's name that involved war and punishment. When the Israelites built the golden calf, Moses didn't just break the tablets, he ordered executions. When rebellion arose, he responded with swift discipline. These decisions reflect the pressures he faced to maintain unity and reverence. In a community prone to fear and doubt, it's tempting to idealize Moses as only a peaceful prophet. But the reality is more complex. He was a leader navigating impossible tensions, sometimes with grace, sometimes with severity. And in that tension, we see not just the cost of leadership but the price of forging a people from the ashes of oppression. Moses is one of the most universally revered figures in religious history. Yet how he is viewed varies dramatically across faiths. Each traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and even others sees him through its own theological lens, emphasizing different aspects of his life, message, and legacy. In Judaism, Moses is the ultimate prophet. He's not just a historical figure, he's the very foundation of Jewish identity and law. It's believed that he wrote the Torah, spoke with God face to face, and delivered the laws that define Jewish life to this day. No prophet is held in higher regard. Moses is seen not only as a leader but as a servant, whose faith and obedience set the standard for all who came after. In Christianity, Moses is honored as a prophet and a precursor to Jesus. He represents the Old Covenant, the law, while Jesus embodies the New Covenant greats. Many Christian teachings use Moses as a bridge to explain the role of Christ, referencing him in sermons, theology, and symbolism. While Moses isn't the central figure, his presence is essential to understanding the narrative arc of salvation in Islam. Moses, known as Musa, is one of the most frequently mentioned prophets in the Quran. He is a messenger of God, chosen to lead his people out of oppression, and he's often used as a model of perseverance and faith under trial. Muslims see Musa as a crucial link in the chain of prophets leading up to Muhammad, and his story is rich with moral and spiritual lessons, even beyond the Abrahamic religions. Moses appears in mystical and cultural traditions like Kabbalah, Baha, and Rastafari, each interpreting his life symbolically. To some, he's a liberator. To others, a divine messenger, a lawgiver, or a revolutionary. Across all these interpretations, one thing is constant: Moses is a figure too powerful to be confined by one narrative alone. Moses may have lived over 3,000 years ago, but his influence is still alive and thriving in culture, politics, music, literature, and everyday language. He's no longer just a religious figure, he's a symbol, a universal icon of freedom, justice, and the power of belief. Leaders across history have invoked Moses as a metaphor for righteous defiance. From civil rights speeches to political revolutions, his name has echoed in rallying cries for liberation. Martin Luther King Jr., in his final speech, famously referenced Moses standing on the mountaintop, seeing the promised land but not entering it. That imagery of struggle, vision, and sacrifice has become foundational in modern movements for justice. In literature and film, Moses is often reimagined to reflect contemporary values. He's portrayed as the reluctant hero, the moral compass, the one who stands alone against tyranny. His story has inspired countless retellings, from grand Hollywood epics to animated children's films. Each version reinforces his place as a timeless figure of ethical courage. Even in casual conversation, we hear echoes of Moses. Parting the Red Sea is shorthand for overcoming impossible odds. The burning bush is seen as a metaphor for moments of calling or inspiration. His narrative language has woven itself into the very way we talk about purpose, conflict, and destiny. Moses represents more than religious devotion. He symbolizes what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. And in a world still wrestling with oppression, injustice, and identity, his legacy feels more relevant than ever. So where does that leave us? With a possible tomb, an ancient mystery, and a prophet whose story continues to evolve. Whether or not the discovered site truly belongs to Moses may never be confirmed. And maybe that's the point. Moses was never about the destination, he was about the journey. The Exodus, the wilderness, the struggle for freedom, these aren't just ancient stories, they're living metaphors. They remind us that faith isn't static, it grows, questions, adapts, and sometimes it faces uncomfortable truths to become stronger. If this tomb is real, if those artifacts truly point to a more complex past, then maybe it's not a threat, it's an invitation to see our spiritual heroes, not as untouchable icons, but as real people navigating impossible paths. People like Moses, who doubted, who failed, and who kept going anyway. In a way, the uncertainty surrounding Moses' final resting place is a gift. It keeps us searching, not just in deserts and mountains, but in ourselves. It invites us to wrestle with history, with belief, with what we think we know, and in doing so it brings faith back to life. So, what do you think? Could the discovery of Moses' tomb change everything, or will it only deepen the mystery? Would it shake your faith or strengthen it? Let us know in the comments, because this is more than history. It's a conversation that spans centuries. And if you found this as thought-provoking as we did, Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into ancient mysteries, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload.